"Sir, I'll need to see your invitation." The words cut through the evening air like ice. Every head in the hotel entrance turned to watch. Harold Wilson, 78, stood frozen in his weathered suit, a small envelope clutched in his trembling hands. Behind him, a line of gleaming Rolls-Royces and Bentleys continued to arrive, discharging guests in designer evening wear. Security had already waved through dozens without checking a single invitation. But Harold, the man who had donated every spare penny for 40 years to the children's hospital being celebrated tonight, was apparently a different matter entirely. The Grand Horizon Hotel glittered against the night sky, its marble foyer spilling golden light onto the red carpet. Inside, champagne flowed freely at the 10,000 a plate Children's Miracle Foundation Gala. The city's elite had gathered to congratulate themselves on their generosity, while photographers captured their benevolence for tomorrow's society pages. Harold shifted uncomfortably as the security guard examined his wrinkled invitation letter. The one he'd received after his latest donation had pushed his lifetime total past $1 million. Not that anyone here would recognize the quiet janitor who had made it all possible. "This isn't the proper invitation," the guard stated flatly, handing back Harold's letter. "This event is for major donors only." A few onlookers snickered. Harold's face flushed with embarrassment as he tried to explain, his voice barely audible over the arrival of another limousine. No one noticed the tall figure who had paused at the entrance, observing the scene with increasing interest. Elon Musk, the evening's guest of honor, slipped his phone into his pocket and stepped forward, his face unreadable as he approached the commotion. Harold Wilson had never owned a car in his life. For 43 years, he had walked or taken the bus to his job as a hospital janitor, saving every penny he could. When his grandson Michael had been diagnosed with a rare heart condition as an infant, the local children's hospital had saved his life despite Harold's inability to pay. That day, Harold had made a promise. Whatever he could spare would go to ensuring other children received the same chance. No one knew about the sacrifices, not the missed meals, not the apartment with the leaking roof he refused to leave because the rent was cheap, not the second job he took cleaning offices at night, well into his 70s. His donation envelopes arrived monthly, always anonymous, until the hospital's new administration had insisted on records for tax purposes. The invitation had arrived 3 weeks ago, a form letter thanking him for reaching the $1 million donor milestone with an invitation to the gala. Harold had spent his last discretionary dollars on having his one suit dry cleaned and taking a taxi to the hotel. He had wanted to see just once the hospital's progress from the inside, to sit quietly in the back and know he had been part of something important. Instead, he stood humiliated, the security guard already turning to the next arrival. "I'm sorry, but there must be some mistake," Harold tried again, his voice cracking. "I've been donating to the Children's Hospital for over 40 years. This letter, double quote." "Sir, this is a private event," the guard interrupted, louder this time. "The proper invitation has a golden seal and a QR code. What you have is just a thank you letter." He gestured to the growing line behind Harold. "Please step aside, or I'll need to call for assistance." Inside the gleaming foyer, wealthy donors clinked crystal glasses while discussing tax benefits and naming opportunities. A massive banner displayed the evening's theme, "Building Miracles Together, Celebrating Our Generous Community." Photographs of smiling children lined the walls, their lives saved by the hospital these people funded. Among them stood hospital administrators in expensive suits, board members who attended quarterly meetings, and celebrities who had lent their names to fundraising campaigns. Name tags identified $1 million donors, $5 million donors, and the exclusive Miracle Makers Circle, who had given $10 million or more. They wore their philanthropy like the designer clothes on their backs, visible, acknowledged, photographed. Harold took a step back, clutching his invitation letter. His eyes misted as he contemplated the long bus ride home, the wasted hope of this evening. Elon Musk moved with deliberate steps, his attention fixed on the exchange. Unlike most attendees, he wore a simple black suit, expensive but understated. No flashy watch, no entourage hovering nearby. The evening's program listed him as the keynote speaker, expected to announce a major matching donation to the hospital's new research wing. Several guests noticed him approaching and shifted to intercept, hands extended for introductions and selfie opportunities. Musk navigated past them with practiced ease, his focus unwavering. He had built his reputation on seeing patterns others missed, on challenging established systems that no longer served their purpose. Tonight was supposed to be a simple appearance: speak, donate, leave early to return to more pressing work. But something about the old man's dignity amid rejection had caught his attention. A photographer stepped into Musk's path, camera raised. "Mr. Musk, could we get a quick photo with the hospital director?" The director, already positioning himself, smiled broadly. "In a moment," Musk replied, brushing past. His mind was running calculations, not of rocket trajectories or battery efficiencies, but of human systems and broken values. He had revolutionized payment systems, electric vehicles, and space travel. But sometimes the most important innovations weren't technological. Sometimes they were moments of simple human recognition in a world that had forgotten how to see. "Excuse me," Musk's voice cut through the ambient chatter, causing heads to turn. The security guard straightened immediately, recognition dawning on his face. "Is there a problem here?" The guard shifted uncomfortably. "No problem, Mr. Musk. Just an invitation issue. This gentleman doesn't have the proper credentials for tonight's event." Harold looked up, confusion crossing his weathered face as he recognized the famous billionaire. He hadn't expected anyone to intervene, especially not someone of Musk's stature. "It's all right," Harold said softly. "I'll just go home." "May I see what he presented?" Musk asked, extending his hand toward the guard. Reluctantly, the guard handed over Harold's letter. Musk scanned it quickly, his expression unchanging. "Mr. Wilson," Musk read from the letter, "thank you for your lifetime contribution exceeding $1 million to the Children's Miracle Foundation. Your consistent support over 40 years has helped us save countless lives." He looked up at Harold with new interest. 40 years of donations? Harold nodded nervously. "Since 1980, yes, my grandson Michael." "Sir," the guard interrupted, "we have a protocol." Mr. Landry, the foundation director, was very clear that only guests with official invitations could enter. By now a small crowd had gathered at the entrance. The hospital's director, sensing a situation involving the evening's most important guest, quickly approached with a practiced smile. "Elon, so glad you made it. I see you've met—" He paused, looking at Harold with confusion. "Mr. Harold Wilson," Musk supplied. "According to this letter, he's been donating to your hospital consistently for 40 years, totaling over $1 million. The director's smile faltered momentarily. "Ah, yes, we have many generous supporters, but tonight is for our principal donors who received formal invitations. I'm sure there's been a misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding," Musk repeated slowly, his tone neutral, but his eyes sharp. "Let's discuss that. May I ask how many people here tonight have supported your hospital for 4 decades? The director's smile remained fixed, though his eyes darted nervously. "Mr. Musk, perhaps we could discuss this inside. The program is about to begin, and everyone is eager to hear your speech." He gestured toward the door, attempting to guide both men away from the growing audience of onlookers. "I'm curious about something," Musk continued, seemingly oblivious to the director's discomfort. "What percentage of your donors have maintained consistent giving for over 4 decades? The crowd had grown quieter, more people tuning into the exchange. Several guests had discreetly raised phones, recording the interaction. "Well, Our long-term donors are certainly valuable, the director began. According to your own reports, it's less than 0.1%, Musk interrupted. Loyalty over time is extraordinarily rare. Yet here stands someone who represents exactly that. He turned to Harold. Mr. Wilson, may I ask what you do for a living? Harold swallowed hard, acutely aware of the audience and the expensive clothes surrounding him. I'm retired now, but I was a janitor at Mercy General Hospital for most of my life. Night shift cleaner at office buildings, too, for extra money. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Someone near the back whispered, "A janitor donated $1 million?" "Please," Harold said quietly to Musk, "I don't want to cause trouble. I just wanted to see the new children's wing. My grandson Michael wouldn't be alive without this hospital." The director stepped forward, sensing a potential PR problem. "Of course, Mr. Wilson is welcome. This is clearly an oversight. The letter should have specified it was an invitation." He glared briefly at the security guard. "Please, both of you, come inside. The program is starting." Musk didn't move. Instead, he studied Harold's face with the same intensity he applied to engineering problems. "Mr. Wilson, you've been giving monthly to this hospital since 1980. Was it always easy to make those donations?" Harold looked down at his worn shoes, suddenly the center of attention, in a way that made him profoundly uncomfortable. "No, sir, not always easy, but necessary, you understand. When they saved Michael, I promised myself I'd help other children get the same chance." "Even during recessions, job losses, personal hardships?" Musk pressed. "There were months when I ate beans for 2 weeks straight," Harold admitted with a small smile. "But children in hospitals don't get to choose when they're sick, so I didn't think I should choose when to stop helping." The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken comparisons. Many in the crowd were one-time donors, giving large sums when the tax benefits aligned or when social recognition was guaranteed. Few had experienced true sacrifice in their giving. The director cleared his throat. "This is precisely why we celebrate our donors. Now, shall we—" "I have another question," Musk interrupted, his voice carrying clearly to the crowd. "Mr. Wilson, how many galas like this have you been invited to before tonight?" Harold looked confused. "None, sir. This was the first. I got the letter because of some new system they have that tracks donor identities." He paused. "I actually preferred staying anonymous. Giving isn't about recognition." A woman in the crowd shifted uncomfortably, fingering her diamond-studded name tag that proudly displayed her Miracle Maker Circle status. A board member nearby recalled the heated debate about whether the expensive gala was worth its cost, with some arguing that the funds could better serve the hospital's mission. Musk turned to address the growing crowd directly. His expression was contemplative rather than accusatory. "I came here tonight to talk about innovation and the future of medicine. But I'm realizing there's a more important conversation to have." He gestured toward Harold. "Innovation isn't just about technology or medicine. Sometimes it's about recognizing when our systems of acknowledgement and gratitude have failed to capture what truly matters." The director's practiced smile finally faltered completely as cameras continued to record the unexpected confrontation. Musk placed a hand lightly on Harold's shoulder and addressed the crowd. "I believe we need to reconsider what we're celebrating tonight." His voice was calm, but carried the same intensity that had convinced investors to back his seemingly impossible ventures. This foundation exists to help children, not to create networking opportunities, not to generate tax write-offs, and certainly not to turn away those who have sacrificed the most. The crowd had grown completely silent. Even the clink of champagne glasses had stopped. "Mr. Wilson has donated over $1 million to this hospital, but more importantly, he's done it 1 month at a time for 40 years, from the earnings of a janitor's salary." Musk turned to Harold. "May I ask what percentage of your income these donations represented?" Harold shifted uncomfortably. About 30%, most months. More when I could manage it. A collective intake of breath rippled through the audience. For most in attendance, even their largest donations represented a far smaller portion of their wealth, often just the amount needed to reach a certain tax bracket. The director stepped forward again. "Mr. Musk, we absolutely value all our donors. If there's been a misunderstanding with Mr. Wilson's invitation—" "This isn't a misunderstanding," Musk interrupted. "This is a systemic failure. We've created a system that values the flash of a large one-time donation over the sustained commitment of regular giving. A system that prioritizes social recognition over silent sacrifice." He scanned the crowd, making eye contact with several prominent donors. "I came here prepared to announce a $50 million matching gift to the new research wing." More murmurs from the crowd, "But I'm changing my approach." The director's face paled visibly, and several board members stepped closer, clearly concerned about the potential loss of such a significant donation. "Instead," Musk continued, "I want to propose something different, something that honors what true philanthropy looks like." Musk guided Harold forward, bringing him fully into the circle of light at the entrance. "My new proposal is this. I will donate $100 million to the hospital." A gasp rippled through the crowd. "But only if you implement significant changes to how you recognize and honor donors." The director's expression wavered between relief at the doubled amount and anxiety about the conditions. "Of course, we're always open to improvements." "First," Musk continued, "the new research wing will not bear my name as you planned. Instead, it will be named after Mr. Wilson and others like him, the consistent, long-term donors who gave when it wasn't easy." Harold began to protest. "Sir, that's not necessary." "Second," Musk pressed on, "a minimum of 20% of all fundraising event seats will be reserved for donors who have demonstrated consistent giving over time, regardless of the total amount." Phones were recording furiously now. Several prominent social media influencers in attendance were already live-streaming the unexpected turn of events. "Third, your donor recognition program will be restructured to acknowledge percentage of income given and duration of support, not just dollar amounts." The director forced a smile. "These are interesting suggestions that the board would certainly need to discuss." "They're not suggestions," Musk stated flatly. "They're conditions of my donation, conditions that reflect values that should have been obvious all along." He turned to Harold. "Mr. Wilson, what would you add? What would make the system better?" Harold looked stunned at being consulted. After a moment's hesitation, he spoke softly but clearly. "Maybe remember that it's about the children, not us. Perhaps use some of the Gala budget for actual treatment. My grandson's medication costs $4,000 a month, this room alone." He gestured at the opulent surroundings, the expensive catering, the elaborate floral arrangements. Musk nodded, a rare genuine smile crossing his face. "An excellent point. So my fourth condition, the foundation will cap administrative and event costs at 15% of donations with full transparency on expenditures." The director's professional composure was crumbling. "Mr. Musk, while we appreciate your generosity, these kinds of operational details are typically left to the board's discretion." "I understand that changing established systems is difficult," Musk replied, his tone softening slightly. "But that's precisely what innovation requires. Sometimes the most important disruptions aren't technological. They're about values." He surveyed the crowd, his gaze direct and challenging. "Who are we recognizing and why? What are we incentivizing? What behaviors are we rewarding?" A board member stepped forward, an older woman with a quiet dignity about her. "As chair of the hospital board, I believe Mr. Musk's conditions are not only reasonable, but necessary. We've lost sight of our mission." She turned to Harold and extended her hand. "Mr. Wilson, on behalf of the Foundation and all the children you've helped, I apologize for tonight's treatment and for every year we failed to properly acknowledge your extraordinary commitment." The mood in the room shifted palpably. Several wealthy donors looked uncomfortable, but others nodded in agreement. A tech billionaire known for his own philanthropy stepped forward. "I'll match Musk's conditions and add $25 million of my own," he announced. Another voice called out from the crowd, "Add my $10 million to the pool with the same conditions." The director, recognizing which way the wind was blowing, found his smile again. "Well, this is turning into quite an extraordinary evening of generosity." Musk shook his head slightly. "Number, this is turning into an evening of correction, of recognizing what genuine generosity has looked like all along." He gestured to Harold, who stood bewildered as the center of attention. "It looks like 40 years of quiet sacrifice from a janitor who never expected his name on a building." The Foundation's annual gala ended very differently than planned. Rather than the typical speeches and self-congratulation, the evening transformed into an impromptu workshop on redefining philanthropic recognition. Harold Wilson found himself seated at the head table next to Elon Musk, quietly sharing stories of his grandson's treatment and his decades of monthly donations. Social media exploded with videos of the confrontation. Janitor philanthropist and real generosity began trending nationwide within hours. News outlets picked up the story by midnight. Billionaire calls out charity for snubbing janitor who donated 30% of lifetime income. For Harold, the attention was overwhelming. He had never sought recognition, had never expected to be anything but anonymous. When reporters asked how he felt about the research wing potentially bearing his name, he simply shook his head. It should be named after the children who fight so bravely, not the adults who just do what's right. By the end of the evening, the total pledged donations had reached over $250 million, all tied to Musk's conditions for reforming the Foundation's recognition practices. The board voted unanimously to implement the changes, with the director abstaining, his future with the organization suddenly uncertain. 3 months later, the Children's Miracle Foundation unveiled its new donor recognition program. Plaques in the hospital lobby now featured 2 metrics alongside each name: years of consistent giving and estimated percentage of income donated. The legacy wall gave prominence to those who had supported the hospital for over a decade, regardless of total amount. The first gala under the new system looked markedly different. The venue was the hospital itself, with patients well enough to participate helping to host. The budget was a quarter of previous events, with the savings directed to patient care. Donors of all levels sat side by side, their name tags displaying only their names, no special markers of status or giving level. Harold attended, wearing the same suit but standing taller now, more confident. Throughout the evening, doctors and nurses approached to thank him personally, some sharing stories of equipment his donations had helped purchase or research his consistency had supported. A children's choir from the hospital performed, including Harold's grandson Michael, now a healthy teenager. Their song, about everyday heroes who changed the world without capes or recognition, brought many in the audience to tears. Musk, present but deliberately keeping a low profile, watched with satisfaction as donors mingled without hierarchy. The conversations focused on impact rather than amounts. The story's impact extended far beyond one hospital foundation. Within a year, over 50 major charitable organizations had adopted similar reforms to their donor recognition practices. The Wilson Principles, as they came to be known, emphasized consistency, sacrifice, and mission over flash and social status. Harold never did allow the research wing to bear his name. Instead, it was dedicated to the consistent ones, those who give month after month, year after year. A small plaque in the entryway told his story, not as an individual to be celebrated, but as a reminder of what genuine philanthropy could look like. Elon Musk spoke about the incident rarely, but when asked in an interview about his most important contribution to society, he surprisingly skipped past his technological innovations. Sometimes disruption isn't about technology, he said. Sometimes it's about seeing value systems that have become corrupted and having the courage to reset them. As for Harold Wilson, he continued his monthly donations until his passing 3 years later. At his funeral, attended by hospital staff, patients, and yes, several billionaires, his grandson Michael revealed that Harold had left behind journals documenting his giving journey. The final entry read simply, "Remember, true charity isn't about recognition. It's about showing up when no one's watching, giving when it's difficult, and keeping your promises to those who need you most."